Chapter 81 Silent Ending and 2 Mu of Spiritual Field. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Black-winged bird, 4 years ago. The two terms that were originally unrelated, now combined together, shocked Chen Mo's heart. One is a carrion bird, and the other is the date of his arrival. Lan Ling mentioned it at this moment, and she was afraid that she had seen it at the beginning. Chen Mo slowly turned around, with a disgusted expression on his face, and said, "What are you talking about? Psycho." Then, regardless of the other party's reaction, he continued to plow the field. Behind him, Lan Ling bit her lips tightly with her pearly teeth. She thought that this information would make Chen Mo compromise, but she didn't expect that the other party didn't care at all. No. Or maybe she didn't admit it at all. The glimpse of 4 years ago, the black shadow that cut through the spiritual field, and the black-winged bird screaming in the sky. Lan Ling didn't take this scene to heart. As the time spent with Chen Mo increased, the picture emerged little by little, and finally pieced together a weird picture in her memory. She gritted her teeth and turned around. She walked away slowly with trembling steps. Until Lan Ling's breath completely disappeared, Chen Mo turned around and looked at her meaningfully. 1 day later, the 15 acres of spiritual fields were sown, the clouds and rain began to gather in the sky, and gradually, a drizzle of early spring moistened the spiritual fields. Chen Mo sat cross-legged and continued to meditate and practice. At this moment, he was holding the second low-grade spiritual stone in his hand. When the spiritual energy contained in this spiritual stone was exhausted, it would be the day when he broke through the 4th level of qi refining. Near dusk, when the spiritual plant husbands around returned to the house, Chen Mo went to activate the mountain viewing image formation arranged around, and briefly retained the current image. Back in the house, he combed the feathers of the spiritual birds again, and fell asleep early that day. Early the next morning, Chen Mo left the spiritual field and went to the market, and came back at almost noon. In this way, he was still busy practicing, farming, and raising spiritual birds, as if nothing had happened. This continued for the next few days. Finally, on the 5th day, Lan Ling knocked on He Jiping's door despite her weak body. As soon as the other party opened the door, the female cultivator who had tried so hard to hang him threw herself into He Jiping's arms, muttering, "One big pill, I will be yours from now on." He Jiping was shocked and almost pushed the other party down in a panic. Finally, he reacted, looked around, and took Lan Ling back to his room. After years of hard work, He Jiping finally waited for a spring day. That night, the female cultivator of the 1st level of qi refining became even weaker. Big pill. Lan Ling almost had no strength to swallow her saliva at this moment, but the heroic He Jiping patted his chest and said, "I don't have it on hand, I'll take you to the market to buy it now." That as he said that, he intentionally or unintentionally revealed the sachet containing spiritual sand. As for whether there was spiritual sand in it, only he knew. Lan Ling was delighted, feeling like she had survived a disaster. In this way, with the help of He Jiping, the two went to the market. However, when it got dark, only he returned. Since then, Lan Ling has not been seen for several months. 10 days, 20 days, 1 month. Her 2 acres of spiritual fields are still abandoned. During this period, Yishi from Wenxiang Pavilion came once, talked to Chen Mo for a few words, and then left in a hurry. But this scene was inevitably seen by He Jiping and Miao Chen. In the past, these two people would definitely gossip about her behind her back. But now they all chose to keep silent. In the 2nd month after spring plowing, that is, 33 days after Lan Ling's disappearance, He Jiping still found Chen Mo. Now, within 100 acres, Chen Mo is an unavoidable obstacle. Other spiritual plant husbands have to look at his face for all their actions. Chen, fellow Taoist Chen. Chen Mo stood outside the spiritual field with an unhappy look on his face. Every time someone approached, he had to leave the image formation, and the time he wasted on cultivation wasted. What's the matter? Lan Ling seems to have disappeared. Is it related to you? Chen Mo suddenly asked back. Ah. He Jiping was shocked instantly, his heart almost jumped out of his throat. He tried to calm down and said, "No. No. It doesn't matter." "Then what do you want to do?" Chen Mo snorted in his heart. Are there good people in this world? There are only a group of selfish cultivators. Of course, this also includes himself. I saw that her spiritual field was barren, and I want to plant this year. Get lost. Chen Mo only said one word, and at this moment, Shao Kong and the chicken shed also rushed over. Now the spiritual bird has reached the chest of a person, and the chicken breast is raised, giving people a full sense of oppression. He Jiping swallowed his saliva, and then walked away in disgrace. How could 2 acres of spiritual field be given to him? As early as the day Yushi came, Chen Mo had already expanded the scope of the shadow formation. Now, what He Jiping and others saw was just an illusion. It was already green inside. In another 3 months, the spiritual rice planted will also mature, and by then, the harvest will be 7,000 kilograms. He Jiping left in disgrace, and before he returned to the house, Miao Chen came to meet him. What do you think? Are you willing to give it? Seeing the other party shaking his head, this good friend was immediately filled with indignation. What right does he have to occupy those 2 acres of spiritual fields? Is Guchen Fengshi's surname Chen? If you don't believe me, I'm going to find him. Shoo! He Jiping quickly covered Miao Chen's mouth. Stop talking, he is now at the 3rd level of qi refining. What's wrong with the 3rd level of qi refining? Can he be unreasonable at the 3rd level of qi refining? Let's go find Nyo's shop. I say. Forget it. He Jiping suddenly shouted, and his words were very impetuous. You. Miao Chen widened his eyes and looked at him in confusion. I say forget it, let's plant our own 1 acre and 3 mu of land first. That He Jiping was scared. The rhetorical question just now made him realize that Chen Mo might know that he sold Lan Ling to Wenxiang Pavilion. If Fengshe knew about this, he would be afraid that he would not be able to protect himself. If he went to Nyo's shop now, wouldn't it be like walking into a trap? Moreover, for some unknown reason, Wenxiang Pavilion did not ask for the reason and gave him a large amount of spiritual sand. Now he was asked to spit it back. What was he going to spit it back? On the side, Miao Chen saw that the other party was backing down, and he had no choice. He would not offend Chen Mo. Busy month 16, sunny. Since the beginning of the middle of summer, the sun has been shining every day. There was a lot of cicadas chirping outside. The spiritual plant husbands who were supposed to stay indoors to practice summer heat took advantage of the cooler weather in the morning to make spells to make rain. This summer, the temperature was particularly high. Originally, it rained every 2 or 3 days. But now it has to be poured almost every day, while everyone else was busy making it rain. A man with a sickle and a rooster was also busy. Chapter 82 Harvest Progress and Spiritual Plant Atlas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 1 acre, 2 acres. As Chen Mo quickly waved the sickle, the spiritual rice in the field was cut off in pieces. The scorching sun was high in the sky, and his clothes were completely wet with sweat. Behind him, Shao Kong ran quickly, pecking at the spiritual rice that fell on the ground. Now, it is as tall as a normal human being. The blue, strongness, talent has increased its individual gain to 50%, although this 50% is placed on output. It is obvious, but it is not very intuitive. But when it comes to spiritual birds, that 50% is an extremely exaggerated number. It's like a person who was originally 180 centimeters tall has grown to 270 centimeters tall. This can no longer be described as a giant. This is the case for today's Shao Kong and the other 3 spiritual chickens at the beginning. With its strong breasts, exploding legs, and extremely sharp claws and beak, it gives people a strong sense of oppression just standing there. Especially Shao Kong, eating so much is still useful. Now, its strength is actually reaching the threshold of the 1st level of qi refining. Originally, both spiritual birds and spiritual animals were eaten by monks. While conditioning themselves, they could also nourish the dantian, transform spiritual energy, and even help form golden elixirs. But even the weakest spirit chicken is domesticated from a monster. Therefore, it is not impossible to retain part of the bloodline, or even to return to one's ancestors. Chen Mo has no plans to sell Shao Kong. In the past 2 years, this spiritual and strong chicken has become his companion day and night. Occasionally when his practice is boring, he will sit with his back to him, thinking about life and the future. Of course, Shao Kong would definitely not think so, except when Chen Mo needs it. The rest of the time, it hangs around the 10 little hens, hoping that they will grow up quickly so that it can lay eggs for it. But Shao Kong has forgotten how terrifying he is now. The spiritual birds as tall as a person circled around the hens that were no longer than their knees, so frightened that these unconscious spiritual chickens could only tremble. Even so, Shao Kong still enjoys it. Perhaps this can be considered a sense of conquest. Chen Mo's movements became more and more skillful, and 17 acres of spiritual fields were harvested in one day. It took another 2 days to sift the spiritual rice, put it into grain bags, and neatly stack it in the storage space. Every time at this time, Chen Mo would lament that the first big thing he bought after getting rich was a storage ring. What a right decision it was. If there is no storage ring, what will happen to these spiritual rice? It can be stored in a big pit for 10 days and a half, but it needs to be stored for 4 to 5 months, or even half a year, even if it gets wet. What if you want to sell it? Not to mention how huge a number 7,000 pounds is, just pushing it to the market will cause huge trouble. Before the harvest season, where did his food come from? How to explain this? With the storage ring, as long as you store these grains and wait for the harvest at the end of the year to sell them in the market, there will be no problem at all. With last year's experience, Chen Mo burned the mountains of straw as evening approached. Plant ashes are used as nutrients and are resprinkled in the spiritual field. After waiting for 2 days, the soil was turned, sown, and watered in one go. These spiritual fields are built on spiritual veins. As long as the spiritual veins are not exhausted, the consumption of sowing first-level spiritual yellow rice will not be enough to make the land barren. That's how the mysterious red fruit would be. Chen Mo inquired and found that even ordinary medicinal materials for alchemy would not be like this. I have been busy for a week, during which there was almost no practice. After the second crop of seeds this year was planted, Chen Mo started the next practice. Name, Chen Mo. Occupations, spiritual planter, unlocked, spiritual support officer, unlocked, spiritual fisherman, unlocked. Lifespan, 33/80, cultivation, 3rd level of qi refining. Exercise, nourishing qi ju, 259/300. Spiritual root, golden spirit root, level 173/100. Spell. Rain spreading technique. Shaoqing 492/800. Qi crossing technique, Shaoqing 33/800. Activation technique, Mastery 281/400. Flame palm, Shaoqing 773/800. Gung gold index, Desheng 1/1600. Spirit snake body technique, Shaoqing 639/800. Talent, Ling Jifu, increase yield, purple, breed, purple, accelerate ripening, green. Spiritual Yangguan, strong, blue. For more than a year, although Chen Mo's level has not changed at all, his experience value is getting closer and closer to the 300 mark, 0.41 points of experience. Almost 3 months left. At that time, he will successfully break through and enter the middle stage of qi refining in one fell swoop. This kind of speed may be average in Qingyang sect, but for a monk who was eliminated and reduced to a spiritual cultivator, it is simply a genius. Of course, Chen Mo also knows his own advantages. He must rely on farming to continuously accumulate wealth, which can then be transformed into more and more cultivation resources, use double, triple, or even 10 times the resources to catch up with those talented monks. During this period, one must practice hard every day to be able to withstand the loneliness, otherwise, once you have resources, you will indulge your desires and linger in front of Wenxiang Pavilion every day. With Chen Mo's talent, I'm afraid he won't be able to build a foundation until he dies. The sun sets. After a day of hard training, Chen Mo returned home. Shao Kong also successfully completed his mission and drove all the spiritual birds back to the chicken coop. Chen Mo read a book as usual before continuing to practice. These books were bought from the market. One type is the Spiritual Plant Atlas, which is also the book that he spent the most money to get. It introduces the types of spiritual plants in Wuqi country, in addition to the most basic spiritual rice, there are other spiritual plants that are more picky about planting methods and planting environments. For example, dragon blood grass is a necessary medicinal material for refining foundation pills. Its growth cycle is about 3 to 5 years, and if you want to grow it into medicine, it must always be in a constant temperature state. This is the case all year round. Another example is the blue spiritual fruit, which takes 10 years to grow into a tree, 10 years to grow into a tree, 10 years to bloom, and 10 years to bear fruit. The place where it grows must be above the third-level spiritual vein. Its specific use is not recorded in the atlas, but the harsh planting conditions alone show that its fruit is absolutely extraordinary. There are also spiritual plants such as swordwood and poisonous poison king flower used for refining tools and preparing poisons. That day, after Chen Mo opened the atlas, he spent 15 taels of spiritual sand to buy it without any hesitation. It was a thick book, and it recorded all the spiritual plants he had never heard of. It also made Chen Mo realize how rich and colorful the cultivation world is. The spiritual yellow rice he relies on now is just the daily diet of the disciples in the 112 fairy peaks of Qingyang sect. The fasting pills that were refined out of necessity were only taken by casual cultivators like them. However, although Chen Mo is still a spiritual plant husband, he has gradually broken free from the shackles of this identity. At least, he also eats spiritual rice every day. Chapter 83, Too much food is also a problem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Snap. 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 Along with the sound of exploding through the air, a terrifying heat wave shot out from Chen Mo's palms. Boom. The ground beneath my feet shook slightly, a pair of huge palms were imprinted on the ground, and the surrounding weeds sprouted sparks until they finally withered. Chen Mo closed his palms and looked at his hands. The blazing flames gave people a strong sense of oppression. If the palm just struck him, the blue python robe would probably be damaged. Although Chen Mo has not yet reached the 4th level of qi refining, the strength of the flame palm at the Desheng stage is no longer the same. Different from the gung gold finger, this spell, which is purely known for its lethality, is even more effective when used for fighting. At this point, this spell that has been accompanying Chen Mo for nearly 5 years has finally reached its bottleneck. Nowadays, in addition to the life-based spells, there is also a spiritual snake body technique that has not yet been fully developed. However, with his hard and skillful practice, the breakthrough of this spell is imminent. Come. Attack me. Shao Kong, who is about the same size as a human, is already eager to give it a try. As soon as Chen Mo opened his mouth, it turned into an afterimage and attacked Chen Mo. The terrifying speed and powerful flexibility made Shao Kong keep pecking at the opponent's chest. Chen Mo, on the other hand, was desperately dodging, trying to avoid its attack. State. 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 Shao Kang's beak hit Chen Mo's chest several times in succession. Although he was not strong and protected by the blue python robe, the strong impact still deformed his movements. However, Chen Mo still enjoyed it. He looked at the +1 and +1 that kept popping up in front of him, and he was in a good mood. Of course, for Shao Kong, this sparring method of only attacking and only venting makes him extremely happy. The chicken's head was shaking and vague, hitting Chen Mo's chest again and again. It pecked the ground mercilessly, as if venting his inner dissatisfaction, who told him not to buy himself a hen. Just when Shao Kong was triumphantly venting his inner struggle, his opponent suddenly felt light, and then his movements became erratic. It could hit once with 10 pecks, but found that it suddenly lost its target. The opponent is obviously still in front of him, but no matter how he attacks, he just can't hit him. Suddenly. As soon as the figure flashed, Chen Mo ducked around behind Shao Kong, then pinched the other person's chicken neck with his big hands and held down the electric motor-like head. Okay, it's useless for you. He patted the comb and smiled. Since the discovery of Shao Kang's effect, the progress of the spiritual snake body technique has been rapid. Originally, there was a gap of more than 300 experience points compared to Flame Palm, but he caught up within just 1 month, and all this is thanks to Shao Kang's chicken head. Spells are also like moves. If someone feeds them, the upgrade speed will become faster. The sudden change just now was the recruitment of Chen Moling's master of snake movement. Nowadays, unless it is a quick cast spell, monks below the 3rd level of qi refining cannot even think of getting close to him. let alone a spell that is at most proficient. It was impossible to hit him. Not only that, Deshang's spirit snake body technique also gave Chen Mo a certain degree of self-protection when facing 4th level Qi refining monks. The same goes for breaking through the 4th level of Qi refining in the future. Even if you can't beat him, you still have the possibility of escaping. The rain-making technique will break through in 2 or 3 months, and the Qi transfer technique will need to breed another wave of seeds. I just don't know if Song Yunshi will be able to come back by the end of the year. Chen Mo guessed, I really didn't expect that even with a large amount of spiritual rice now, it would be a bit difficult to handle. And this also made him understand that Ling Jifu's identity almost locked their future. It won't work if we can't get the resources, and it won't work if we get the resources. The more spiritual rice you have, the greater the possibility of being robbed if it cannot be processed. In line with what Chen Mo said back then, if you don't stockpile guns, your home is a granary. In the 3rd year after the disaster, everything was calm, except that this summer is extremely hot. It is not a big surprise that Ling Jifu is even busier. Every morning, you can always see a group of spiritual practitioners standing in the fields, forcing rain on their bodies, which are depleted of spiritual energy. 3 years and 1 disaster. Minor disasters and disasters are not terrible, but they also delay the spiritual cultivation of practitioners in disguise, just like Chen Mo a few years ago. The spiritual sand is used to restore spiritual energy, so how can he improve his kung fu practice? But now, Chen Mo is different, not to mention the low-grade spiritual stones in his hand. The nearly endless amount of spiritual rice alone was enough for him to squander freely. He even made rice cakes from spiritual rice. Every half hour, he would take a piece out of the storage ring and chew it happily. However, an unexpected drought disrupted his plans. The 4th level of Qi refining, which was originally able to be broken through in more than 3 months, has been delayed to 4 months. I am afraid that I will have to wait until the 2nd crop of spiritual rice is harvested before I can break through. Since last year, Chen Mo has stopped taking bigu pills. After eating spiritual rice every day for a year, I gained more than 10 points of experience from the food. If he eats 2nd level spiritual rice instead, his cultivation speed will be twice as fast. Time passes day by day. The hot summer has finally passed, and the so-called drought has not caused much trouble. Ling Jifu also breathed a sigh of relief. This year, they survived. Everything is back on track. When the harvest comes, they will live a good life. However, they may not know that this cycle consumes their last bit of potential. Qinyang sect wants a group of diligent and hard-working cattle and horses who cannot get rid of their status, rather than relying on practice to grow up little by little into spiritual plant husbands who threaten their disciples. After all, spiritual plant husbands at the 7th or 8th level of Qi refining are definitely better than geniuses at the 3rd or 4th level of Qi refining, right? It's autumn, the surroundings of Guchenfang market are golden, the rice ears are bent, and the spiritual plant husbands are in a good mood. The cattle and horses are only happy because they have something to eat. Chen Mo wiped the sweat from his forehead. After harvesting the 2nd crop, he also removed the photos that covered the secret in the dark. 100 kilograms of spiritual rice were neatly stacked next to the chicken coop. Even with such an exaggerated number, no spiritual plant husband dared to covet other people's spiritual rice at this time. These are used to pay taxes and rents. There are still 5,000 kilograms left, together with the 7,000 kilograms of spiritual rice from half a year ago, quietly staying in Chen Mo's storage ring. The 20-foot square space is now half full. In other words, if there are more than 10,000 kilograms of grain, the storage ring he bought with 5 low-grade spiritual stones will not be enough. Fortunately, it is the end of the year. Chen Mo can sell grain again. However, even so, the problem is in front of him again. 17 acres of spiritual fields can only harvest 3,400 kilograms at most. After deducting taxes and rents, there are at most about 1,700 kilograms left. In the entire Guchenfang city, apart from the 1st, 2nd and 3rd grain stations, there are only 5 grain stores in total. Even if 1,700 kilograms are sold to one store, only 8,500 kilograms can be sold. What should I do with the remaining 3,500 kilograms? Chapter 84 Humiliation, the 4th level of Qi refining and the talent, spirit gathering. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Mo suddenly exhaled a breath of turbid air. and the spiritual energy running in his body stagnated, almost stuck at the last level. He stood up slowly, put the spiritual sand that still had a trace of spiritual energy in his hand into his pocket, and secretly clenched his fists. "What's going on? Why haven't you come yet?" Seeing the colorful fallen leaves and the strong autumn mood, the grain collector from Xian Peak has not yet arrived. More than half a month has passed since the harvest, and Ling Jifu from Guchenfang City is looking forward to it every day. Before the grain collector came, they did not dare to go to the market without permission to sell spiritual rice, but now, Xianfeng keeps delaying, and Ling Jifu can no longer hold back. At this moment, Chen Mo was also waiting anxiously. Not only did he fail to sell food, he even got stuck on the 4th level of qi refining. If we say that 1 layer every 3 years, it would be acceptable to Ling Jifu, but 1 layer every 2 years would inevitably attract the attention of the Xian Peak grain collector. Therefore, Chen Mo had to suppress the attraction brought by power and hold himself back from breaking through the 4th level of qi refining. Just like that, we waited for a few more days. Siyu, the grain collector who has served for 4 consecutive years, is finally here. Different from her youthfulness when they first met and her arrogance when they met for the second time, she has become much calmer after the baptism of time. Perhaps it was due to the improvement of her realm or the fall of the genius, but at this time, Siyu's eyebrows became a bit more cold and mature. Next to her was Niu Yuliang, the owner of Guchenfang City. Besides, there is no third person. The two of them hurried from south to north, and there were more and more spiritual rice in the storage ring. During this period, Niu Yuliang tried to communicate with Siyu, but the other party always had a cold face and said nothing. When the Yu Jian appeared in front of Chen Mo and saw the house behind him, they were slightly stunned, but they didn't take it too seriously. "Where's the food?" Niu Yuliang asked proactively. Chen Mo pointed to the grain bag beside him and said, 17 acres of spiritual land, a total of 1,700 kilograms. Siyu stepped forward and put everything into the storage space with a wave of her sleeves. But just when she was about to leave, she suddenly looked at Chen Mo and frowned slightly. 3rd level of qi refining. Chen Mo took a deep breath and said, "Yes. Why not in the secret realm?" The other party's tone was obviously dissatisfied. Now, 2 years have passed, and the first batch of dead soldiers have been used up as early as last year, and their death has also successfully torn a hole at the entrance of the secret realm, allowing monks below the foundation to successfully enter. As an outstanding disciple among the 2nd generation of Xian Peak, Li Shangxian became the pioneer without hesitation. On this day last year, the reason why Siyu hurriedly collected grain was to meet senior brother Li, but Li Shangxian, who was dedicated to seeking the truth, did not wait for her return. Originally, she wanted to follow senior brother Li's footsteps and enter the secret realm, but the Peak Master issued a death order, and non-disciples of the 9th level of qi refining were not allowed to enter. In his opinion, there are still great risks in entering the secret realm. Therefore, the higher the level, the greater the possibility of success. Therefore, over the past year, Siyu has practiced desperately just to break through to the 9th level of qi refining as soon as possible. The coming and going will delay the plan of harvesting grain. It just broke through not long ago. The moment Chen Mo responded, Siyu's expression suddenly became complicated. She looked him up and down and asked again, "Have I seen you?" "I've been like this for 5. Chen Mo. Finally, this proud daughter of Xian Peak recognized him. "Have you achieved any success with your flame palm?" Chen Mo smiled bitterly and shook his head. How could he admit it? However, Siyu then chuckled and sneered, "Lingzifu is Lingzifu. Compared with senior brother Li, it is heaven and earth." As she spoke, she tapped her toes, stepped on the flying sword, and flew to the next spiritual field. Chen Mo stood there, looking at the graceful back, slowly stretched out his right hand, pointed it at the opponent's head, and made a shooting gesture. Bang! He blew on his fingertips and then smiled. "It's written down in the notebook." Originally, Chen Mo was worried that if he exposed his strength, the other party would forcibly accept him as his disciple. Unexpectedly, he just wanted to step on him by asking more questions and praise his senior brother Li at the same time. He watched the two figures disappear into the horizon. The next moment, a violent storm of spiritual energy erupted from his body, and a small vortex even formed around it. The vortex slowly gathered, and finally gathered in his dantian. The breakthrough only lasts for a moment, but it seems like a glimpse of 10,000 years. Chen Mo had yet to fully experience this beauty, and the bright yellow font in front of him brought him back to reality. Please select a professional talent. Lingzifuling Yangwen. What's going on? Chen Mo immediately opened the panel, and there was no change in the talent column. Unlike before, he would awaken a talent every time he leveled up, but this time he was given the option. He only thought about it for a moment and realized something. It seems that no matter how many professions are unlocked, in addition to the first talent awakened when unlocked, only one talent can be awakened every time the realm is broken. But it's good, at least it gives you a chance to choose. Whether he chooses to awaken the talent of Ling Jifu or the talent of awakening Ling Yangguan is entirely up to his own will. As for what kind of talent, that depends on fate. Chen Mo stood there and thought seriously. After a few breaths, his eyes stayed on the three bright yellow characters of spiritual plant husband. The dust settled with a thought. The next moment, the words gradually melted behind the talent of the spiritual plant husband. Gathering spirits, green the change of the way of heaven, in seizing the sky, in creating, in the place where nature and earth nurture are unmatched by human power, but those who change their fate against the will of heaven are called gathering spirits. This talent can be incorporated into the formation, and the quality of the spiritual field will be improved by 100%, and the effective range is 5 acres, can be unlocked by casting any first-level spiritual formation. Improve the quality of the spiritual field. Chen Mo was shocked. Increase by 100%, then has it reached the standard of the second-level spiritual field? This question immediately popped up in his mind. The spiritual plant atlas records many spiritual plants needed for alchemy, but those spiritual plants require at least the second-level spiritual field to be planted. If the gathering spirits talent can break the limit and allow him to successfully plant the Chinese medicinal materials in the atlas, then his hope of building a foundation will probably increase a few more points. Formation again. 2 talents in a row are related to formation, which is equivalent to forcing Chen Mo to become a spiritual formation master. Otherwise, whether it is ripe or gathering spirits, such a powerful talent can only remain green. It's simply a waste of natural resources. However, the reality is in front of him. From the process of learning the Wangshan Luiying formation, it can be known that his formation talent is mediocre. Which spiritual formation master would accept a cultivator with mediocre talent as a disciple? Chapter 85, Selling Food is Also Crazy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Chen Mo laughed bitterly at himself, he walked to the spiritual field with his hands behind his back. The shadow formation that had been removed was activated again, the scenery inside and outside was the same, and there were no spiritual plants inside, so for a moment, no changes could be felt. However, in just a few breaths, the spiritual energy in the huge spiritual field gradually gathered in one place. In less than a cup of tea, a spiritual field that was obviously different from other plots suddenly appeared. Chen Mo walked over quickly and squatted down to observe carefully. The soil became more fertile and the spiritual energy contained was more abundant. Although I don't know if it has reached the standard of the second-level spiritual field, one thing is certain. If this land is used to grow first-level spiritual yellow rice, its quality will definitely improve. Think of a way to get some Xuani spiritual rice next year. He can breed and cultivate, and he can produce and sell it by himself. By then, relying on Xuani spiritual rice, his cultivation speed will be even faster. After dispersing the shadow formation, Chen Mo returned home. The moment he opened the door, Shao Kong rushed out. These days, Chen Mo has been keeping the 4 spiritual birds he bought at the beginning in the house to prevent the grain collector from seeing them and causing unnecessary trouble. After all, there are probably no spiritual birds of this size in the entire Guchenfang market. Chuck. Chuck. What are you calling? Chuck. Chuck. Shao Kong pecked the ground unhappily, then raised his head and opened his mouth. Chen Mo sneered, grabbed a handful of drunken aphids from the storage space, and threw them into the air. Shao Kong pecked them one by one at a speed as fast as an afterimage, and not even one fell to the ground. After it finished eating, Chen Mo held its chicken neck with both hands, pulled it back hard, and threw it out. After eating, stop blocking the door. That Shao Kong was thrown away, and the remaining 3 spiritual birds also looked around and staggered out. After simply cleaning up the messy house, Chen Mo, who was at the 4th level of Qi refining, began another round of hard practice. Everyone below the golden core is an ant, there is no end to the practice. Year after year, without a strong heart, it is really difficult to go further and further on the road of practice. After one night, Chen Mo set off. Along the way, there was an endless stream of spiritual plant farmers around Guchen Market. 1 year of disasters, 2 years of losses. This 3rd year, the harvested spiritual rice finally belongs to them. How can they not be excited? Even the neighbors who had never interacted with each other before, on this day of selling grain, also greeted happily and excitedly. Before entering Guchen Market, Chen Mo found a remote place, took out the cart and 2,000 kilograms of grain, and then entered the city with spiritual rice that was better than people. The appearance of this scene attracted the attention of the surrounding spiritual plant farmers, who swallowed their saliva and cast envious eyes. A big farmer. This is a big grain farmer. How many acres of spiritual fields has he planted? There must be 1 or 2,000 kilograms here. Shoo! An old man made a gesture to silence. He must be at the 3rd or 4th level of Qi refining. Don't talk nonsense. Chen Mo didn't care about the eyes of others. However, the gazes of others made him realize a problem. 2,000 kilograms of rice are really ostentatious, and these spiritual plant farmers who also came to sell grain will remember him at a glance. Therefore, Chen Mo, who originally planned to sell 10,000 kilograms of spiritual rice in one day, planned to keep an eye out to prevent unnecessary trouble. The market, which had been silent for a long time, finally ushered in a lively day again. There are more and more casual cultivators who cheat on the roadside, and the things they sell are also varied, everything. Chen Mo pushed the cart and walked along the Bluestone Avenue. The casual cultivators around him kept calling out to him, hoping that he would come to patronize them after selling the grain. The first stop was the Niu family shop. On the grain collecting day after the harvest year, the whole market was busy, not to mention the Niu family shop with an official background. According to past practice, whoever was responsible for reception was responsible for collecting grain. As the manager of the Niu family shop, Wei Wuwei was naturally very busy. However, when Chen Mo appeared and the servant informed him, he still came to the front yard to entertain him in person. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Chen. Wei Wuwei glanced at it and saw that there were at least 1,000 pounds on the cart. For a moment, his face was full of smiles. Thank you for the kindness, Manager Wei. If you hadn't given me the land, I wouldn't have been able to grow such a large area. Let me tell you, as a spiritual plant husband, having a field is the best way. Isn't it better to have more spiritual fields? Those short-sighted guys, seeing that you harvested so much grain this year, I'm afraid they will regret it now. Wei Wuwei was in a good mood and talked a little more. That the two of them praised each other for their business and smiled at each other. It took about an incense stick of time. After weighing 2,000 kilograms of grain, Chen Mo received 160 taels of spiritual sand from the Niu family shop. Such a huge sum of money, any spiritual plant husband must be cautious and cherish it. However, for Chen Mo now, this can only be regarded as change, and the big head is still to come. After exchanging pleasantries, he walked out of the back door of the grain store to avoid being targeted, passed through the deserted alley, and when he appeared on the street, there were 3,000 kilograms of spiritual rice on the cart he was pushing. Chen Mo walked out in a circle. The casual cultivators squatting on the roadside were full of doubts at this moment. Didn't the negotiation come to an agreement? Didn't sell it to the Niu family shop? Ignoring his gaze, Chen Mo entered the second grain shop as early as last year. The manager of this shop remembered him. Those who can sell grain in the second year after the disaster must not be underestimated, and sure enough, this year, they brought such a huge sum of money to their shop. Old rules? Chen Mo asked with a smile. Old rules. The manager stuttered a little, and hurried into the house to call the shopkeeper out. The so-called old rules are that information is strictly confidential. Whether it is the 123rd grain station or the current Chunmi grain shop, they will not reveal who sold the grain to them. After all, according to the rules, these grains should be purchased by the Nyo family shop, however, doing business. There must be some background, to be able to open a grain shop in the market, there must be some relationship with Xian Peak behind it, sold 3,000 kilograms of grain and exchanged it directly from the shopkeeper Wu for 3 low-grade spirit stones. The shopkeeper Wu even personally sent Chen Mo out through the back door. This time, he did not sell the rest. Instead, he returned home without giving anyone a chance to shout. Feeding, combing, practicing. Early the next morning, he hurried to the market again. Fortunately, the market was not small, so there was always a way for him to go. After selling 2 more carts of spiritual rice, Chen Mo went home again. Until the 3rd day, 11,000 caddies of spiritual rice were finally sold out. The remaining 1,000 caddies were kept for breeding and consumption, and the other 11,000 caddies. Now it has been exchanged for 9 low-grade spiritual stones and 160 taels of spiritual sand, quietly stored in the ring. Chapter 86 Prolonging Life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 9 low-grade spirit stones. This is a number that almost all spirit plant husbands cannot earn in their lifetime. Now, Chen Mo is walking on the Bluestone Avenue of Guchenfang City with this huge sum of money. Wenxiang Pavilion? If Song Yunxi is not there, he will naturally not go there. After thinking about it, he finally feels that Yunyu Book House is the best place to go. Guchenfang City is not big. It takes less than an incense stick to walk from one end to the other. Soon, Chen Mo came to this simple and elegant shop. In the room, the old man with beard and hair is still sitting in front of the counter, holding the ancient book and reading it intently. Until Chen Mo walked in, he slowly raised his head, that is, he took a look, nodded, and immersed himself in the ancient book again. This is not the first time Chen Mo has dealt with the other party. In addition to the purchase of first-level spiritual array outline, the spiritual plant atlas and Wu Qigua travel notes were both obtained from Xue Chongwu. A lot of spiritual sand was spent in total. Chen Mo stood in front of the counter and looked at the bookshelf behind him. Most of the books here are handwritten, and Qingyang's sect would never sell the originals in a market. Senior Xue, I want to pick a martial arts method. Seeing him speak, Xue Chongwu did not get annoyed that he interrupted his thoughts, but stood up expressionlessly, picked out 2 books from the bookcase behind him, and put them on the table. Chen Mo opened the cover, a small seal Qingfeng Ju and a gold-stamped Luyang Dao Fei. He knew the rules, so he did not start to look through them, but he was still a little surprised to see these 2 books. Chen Mo thought about it and asked, "Is this a martial arts method in the 12 gongs?" After this, Xue Chongwu, who was not very talkative, finally spoke and asked with some surprise, "Do you know the 12 gongs?" Chen Mo nodded. "Do you know the price?" "Yes, the most expensive Huaishan Yangqi gong and Tianlan gong are both 5 low-grade spirit stones." At this moment, the other party chuckled. "That's just the price of the Qi training realm." Ah! Chen Mo was stunned. 5 low-grade spirit stones can only buy Qi training realm skills. Doesn't that mean that after building the foundation, you have to buy more? May I ask Senior Xue, how much is the foundation building realm skills worth? 100 times. Hiss. Chen Mo took a breath of cold air. I didn't expect Qinyang's sect to be so shady. The skills that disciples can learn for free are sold at such a high price to casual cultivators. 5 low-grade spirit stones have already cut off the thoughts of almost all casual cultivators, but the foundation building realm actually costs 100 times more. This is considered to have completely cut off their golden elixir road. I thought 9 spirit stones were enough, but I didn't expect that it was not enough at all. Do you want more? Xue Chongwu did not show impatience, but reminded him. Excuse me, senior, which one of the Huaishan Yangqi gong and the Tianlan gong is more suitable for me? Chen Mo asked respectfully. If you don't understand, ask. Although he has practiced for 5 or 6 years and reached the 4th level of Qi refining, compared with the old man in front of him, he is at most a novice in the world of cultivation, and he doesn't understand many things at all. In the past, Xue Chongwu didn't bother to pay attention. After all, most people who come here are here for magic. Few people ask about the more expensive and ineffective skills. In addition, the other party was brought by Song Yunxi for the first time, so the old man still gave him some face and said, the mental method of the Tianlan gong is more powerful. and the speed of improvement after practice can barely catch up with the method of spiritual roots. The Huaishan Yangqi Gong is a fragment, and the skills after the golden elixir are missing, and the speed of practice is not very fast, but the advantage is that it can prolong life. Prolong life? Chen Mo's eyes lit up. Now, what does he lack the most? Lifespan. The most lacking thing is lifespan. Even if he has reached the 4th level of qi refining, his lifespan is only 86 years, but he is already 33. In other words, even if he keeps breaking through the realm, he may only live for 70 or 80 years at most. When he is old, even if he has a lot of talent, it is difficult to turn the tide. Senior, I want the Huaishan Yangqi Gong. Chen Mo did not pick and choose, this is the technique he needs most. Are you sure? Xue Chongwu frowned slightly. Almost every immortal sect has a technique to prolong life, and there is nothing special about it. Sure. I believe you should have heard the saying that if you don't break the golden elixir in one day, you will be an ant for the rest of your life, right? Chen Mo nodded. Since you are born as an ant, why do you live so long? Senior, in my opinion, there is hope only when you are alive. Hope. Xue Chongwu smiled up. Chen Mo stared at the other party and clearly felt the other party's emotional abnormality, but he did not dare to ask more, so he could only wait quietly. After a while, the other party finally spoke. 5 low-grade spirit stones. Here, Chen Mo took out the spirit stones that had been prepared long ago from his pocket and placed them on the counter. After Xue Chongwu received them, he pointed to his palm and said, storage rings are not rare things, there is no need to hide them. Chen Mo smiled awkwardly. Anything else you want to buy? There is no harvesting technique or weeding technique. No need for these. Every time he came to Yunyu bookstore, Chen Mo would ask if there were any spells that could help with harvesting, threshing, and shelling, but the other party always answered that there were no. Heh. Perhaps because he had obtained 5 low-grade spirit stones, Xue Chongwu was in a good mood. It's not that I don't have it, but I won't sell it to you. Why? What was not said, but he soon understood. Senior, then let me ask, are there any special spells? Like clones, hiding, etc. Doppelganger. This time, Xue Chongwu was amused by Chen Mo. Don't you have any? Yes, there are. I don't say whether you can afford it. Even if you can afford it, can you practice it? It's very demanding. Golden elixir. Xue Chongwu just said 2 words, and Chen Mo instantly gave up the idea. It seems that there is no hope for clones, the only hope is puppets. But there are hidden spells. As he said, the other party took 3 more ancient books from the bookshelf and placed them on the table. Chen Mo, who was familiar with the rules, just opened the cover, which were, cicada hiding technique, poison removal technique, and cloud exploration technique. Chen Mo took a look and was surprised. They were all spells suitable for practicing robbery. Senior, what are the prices of cicada hiding technique and poison removal technique? Cloud exploration technique should be good too, but he is surrounded by spiritual plant husbands, who is worth stealing. The former is 1 low-grade spiritual stone, and the latter is 20 taels of spiritual sand. Chen Mo couldn't help but frown. Cicada hiding technique is so expensive. It actually requires spiritual stones to buy. Why don't you take it? Yes. Chen Mo gritted his teeth and decided to buy it for a better survival. Chapter 87 5-Horned Heavy Lizard Monster Egg. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In total, he spent 7 low-grade spirit stones and 20 taels of spirit sand to buy a set of skills and 2 spells. After making a vow not to pass on the knowledge to others, Chen Mo put the 3 ancient books into his storage ring. This deal cannot be said to be cost-effective, but these are what he needs. Afterwards, Chen Mo asked questions about spiritual plants, alchemy, and formations. Xue Chongwu's answers were very straightforward. Yunyu bookstore was not an immortal sect and was not responsible for selling those things, so, Chen Mo's hope was dashed again. It is difficult for casual cultivators without immortal sects to get through the cultivation world, and it can even be said that it is difficult to move forward. However, no matter who sets foot on the immortal path, they will never be able to turn back. Even if they work as cattle and horses, they can never return to the mortal world to be a superior person. After bidding farewell to Xue Chongwu, Chen Mo strolled around the market again. He went to the robe shop and the magic weapon shop, but with his current realm being poor, he looked down on them and could not afford the good things, so he finally failed to upgrade his muskets. He seemed to have earned a lot of spiritual stones in a year, but when he really spent it, he realized that these spiritual stones were not enough to spend. After visiting the shops, the remaining ones were naturally the small shops along the street. Before Chen Mo approached, a group of vendors surrounded him, each with a kind attitude and sincere expression. He was counting on the big customer in front of him to spend a lot of money. After all, they watched Chen Mo push a large cart of grain into the market, and now he definitely has spiritual stones in his pocket. What's your name, fellow Taoist? Fellow Taoist, I have a top-grade magic weapon, the 9-dragon green snake. Come on, fellow Taoist, take a look at this tripod, it was made by Elder Huang Yunfeng himself. Fellow Taoist, I have this. Chen Mo was surrounded in the middle and couldn't move. However, these people seemed to be sincere, but they had already regarded him as a fat sheep to be slaughtered. If it was really a good thing, they wouldn't set up a stall to sell it in the market. Those shops with the endorsement of Z and Peak have already taken away these good things. Chen Mo pushed aside the crowd and looked around casually, and found that many so-called top-grade magic tools were just defective or even broken magic tools. They can be used, but the effect is greatly reduced. In addition, some fruits pretending to be seeds were also seen. He, who has achieved a small success in the art of crossing the air, could not deceive his eyes at all whether he had bred life. There are even some people selling skills and magic. The content recorded above is serious, but can it be practiced? Perhaps only the editor knows. From the beginning to the end, Chen Mo finally found something he was interested in. A female cultivator with long hair hanging down to her shoulders sat quietly on the futon, closing her eyes to practice. In front of her, there was a wooden table, on which were placed crystal-clear eggs. Chen Mo sensed it with his spiritual energy, and these eggs actually had a faint breath of life. Excuse me, what are these? Monster eggs. The other party answered calmly without opening his eyes. Judging from the tone, she seemed to be uninterested. Monster eggs? What can be hatched? Chen Mo asked again. Five-horned heavy lizard. Five-horned heavy lizard. Chen Mo had never heard of it, but since it was a monster, it must be very powerful. How much is it? 1 low-grade spirit stone for 1 egg. So expensive? Chen Mo almost blurted it out. At this time, the female cultivator opened her eyes and looked at him. I killed a first-level, 9th-level 5-horned heavy lizard to get these eggs. Do you think it's worth it? 0.1 spirit stone for 1 monster. Chen Mo thought it was reasonable. However, he has no experience in taming monsters now, and spending a spirit stone to buy it is more or less arbitrary. How long will it take to hatch? Unknown. Unknown. What does it mean? The other party was too lazy to hide it, so he continued, these monster eggs have been in my storage space for more than a year. They are the same as they were when I got them. Ning Jilan looked at the spiritual plant husband in front of her and continued, if you want it, spend a spiritual stone to buy it and bet whether it will hatch. If you hesitate, please don't waste my time anymore. This way of doing business was really beyond Chen Mo's expectations. The other party's words expressed one meaning, whether this thing is real or fake, she doesn't know. You can buy it if you want, or not. Chen Mo weighed the pros and cons, thought about it, and finally gave up. He is rich now, but he can't spend it like this. A low-grade spiritual stone is enough for him to practice for more than half a year. The key is that yours is too expensive. If it's 20 or 30 taels of spiritual sand. 20 taels each, take it away now if you want. Originally, Chen Mo just sighed, but he didn't expect the other party to bargain for him, and it was a broken bone. At this moment, he thought of the casual cultivator who sold him the mysterious seeds. The other party also cut himself and broke his bones. Could it be that all the casual cultivators who set up stalls and hawk their wares have this habit? Or are these things not worth the price they offered at the beginning? Chen Mo originally planned to bargain again, but seeing the other party's expression, He thought about it and took out 20 taels of spiritual sand and put it on the table. Pick whatever you want. The other party stretched out his hand, took the spiritual sand into his arms, and continued to practice with his eyes closed. Chen Mo put his hand on the monster egg, and subconsciously passed the spiritual energy into his fingertips. Finally, he really felt the fetal movement of life just like when breeding. The egg is real. Chen Mo could clearly sense a violent breath. This kind of breath is wilder and stronger than the spirit birds he raised. He put his hand on the second monster egg, but this time, the breath just now disappeared. Instead, it was docile, weak, and even somewhat familiar. The third and fourth eggs were the same. By it, Chen Mo did not touch the remaining eggs, but at this moment, he figured it out. The female cultivator in front of him seemed to be extremely calm and had little interest in doing business, but these were just appearances. This is her personality. There are more than a dozen eggs on the table, most of which are spirit bird eggs, not five-horned heavy lizard eggs at all. Maybe there are, maybe only one or two. Okay, then I will. Chen Mo put his hand on a kind of spirit bird egg, pretending to take it. However, at this moment, he sneered in his heart. At the moment when the other party thought he was going to pick it up, his wrist flashed, and he quickly grabbed the first egg he touched, and turned around and left without saying a word. The next moment, Ning Zhilan stood up. Stop. Stop right there. I won't sell it anymore. Ning Zhilan was so anxious that she jumped up and down, but Chen Mo, who was using the spirit snake technique, had already disappeared in the crowd. One of the only two eggs of the five-horned heavy lizard was picked up, and Ning Zhilan clenched her fists in anger. I thought I had caught a big fat sheep, but I didn't expect to lose money. But soon, Ning Zhilan smiled with relief. Hee, what if you picked it? Can it hatch? Chapter 88 Hatching Eggs and Cultivation Progress. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Do you want to do it? Just as Chen Mo walked through the crowd and walked out, a deep voice was drowned in the noise. For the two brothers Wei Jingming and Wei Jinggong, they have never attacked any spiritual plant husband in these years. It's not because they don't dare, but simply because they look down on it. How much money can a spiritual plant husband make? Killing 10 or 8 people may not be as good as an ordinary casual cultivator. The effort and reward are not proportional at all. However, a spiritual plant husband who can push 2,000 or 3,000 kilograms of grain to sell may not be counted in the ranks of spiritual plant husbands. Now, the two brothers also hesitated. Wei Jingming pondered for a while, gritted his teeth and said secretly, "Do it. Even if he is the only one left with a low-grade spiritual stone, we will make money." Getting the approval of his eldest brother, Wei Jinggong was also eager to try. The two of them rubbed their hands and chased out quickly, but they could not see the target after leaving the market. "Brother, where is that person?" "What are you talking about?" "Chase him." The two chased for a while, but they didn't see any signs at all. The fat sheep in their eyes. Gone. Impossible, this is obviously the only way. Wei Jingming still refused to believe that with their strength of the 5th and 4th levels of qi refining, they couldn't catch up with a spiritual plant husband. But just when they were frustrated, Chen Mo was already sitting at home, brewing a pot of Xianren Peak, playing with the monster egg in his hand. Can this thing really hatch? Crack. Crack. Shao Kong on the side shook his head, and his chicken eyes kept staring at the monster egg in Chen Mo's hand, and a trace of crystal saliva flowed from the corner of his mouth. Go away and play. It's much more valuable than you. This guy actually wants to eat monster eggs. Are you really not afraid of being stuffed to death? But maybe using this egg to make pancakes might actually taste really good. For some reason, this thought came to Chen Mo's mind. After raising chickens for a long time, he thought everything was edible. Maybe this is also the custom of his hometown. To know whether something is good or not, first ask if it can be eaten. If it can be eaten, it's good. If it can't be eaten, no one cares at all. Want to eat eggs? Shao Kong nodded fiercely. If you eat it now, you can only eat one egg. If you hatch it and let it lay more eggs, then you can eat a lot of eggs, right? After Chen Mo finished speaking, Shao Kang's eyes lit up and he nodded faster. It raised its head and gestured twice. then pointed at its butt with its chicken claws, and made a cluck-cluck sound from its mouth. "You hatch it?" Nodding. "Are you kidding me?" Shao Kahn stepped forward and pulled Chen Mo's arm twice, with a look of "Really, brother, you believe me again? 20 taels of spiritual sand, if a chicken eats it, he will really regret it, but Chen Mo is not good at hatching eggs, this kind of thing is originally done by chickens." "Are you sure? If you eat it, you will be deprived of food for 3 months, Shao Kahn nodded for a while, looking relieved. After struggling for a while, Chen Mo finally chose to believe it. After nearly 3 years of living together, his relationship with Shao Kahn is far beyond the comparison of 20 taels of spiritual sand. Seeing him hand it over, Shao Kahn opened his mouth and took it in his mouth, and immediately rushed out. "Damn it!" Chen Mo didn't react in time, and the chicken's shadow was gone. "Fuck you!" He hurriedly chased out. The next moment, he saw Shao Kahn put the eggs of the 5-horned heavy lizard in the chicken's shed, and pressed the other chicken's head with its powerful chicken claws, forcing the other chicken to sit on the eggs. Cluck! Cluck! Good guy. Originally, it was for other chickens to hatch. This spiritual bird, who was raised together with Shao Kahn, felt extremely wronged at the moment, but dared not speak out. The key point is that it is still a rooster. Only Shao Kahn can hatch eggs. As for those hens, it's 3 palaces and 72 concubines in the backyard, can they be asked to do such rough work? Cluck! Cluck! Shao Kahn turned around and looked at Chen Mo while patting his chicken breast with his wings, as if he was wrapped around him. Chen Mo didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he could only let it go. Back in the house again, he lit the oil lamp, took out the Huaishan Yangqi gong from the storage ring and read it carefully. After a quick glance, Chen Mo also had a general understanding. This is a practice created by the founder of Qingyang sect. When this practice was created, it was to solve the problem of the difficulty of breaking through the golden elixir avenue, and plan to use a long life to achieve water grinding skills. However, this path seems to have failed. Those who can form a golden elixir will eventually succeed, those who cannot will never succeed no matter how long they live. Therefore, this technique ultimately only stops at the stage of building a foundation. If the creator did not form a golden elixir, how could there be a sequel? Therefore, Huaishan Yangqi Gong can only be regarded as one of the 12 techniques of Qingyang sect, and it cannot be included in the first and third extremes. However, for Chen Mo now, it is enough to build a foundation, and there is no point in considering so much for the time being. The road is walked step by step, and the food is eaten bite by bite. Having been a spiritual plant husband for so long, he has long accepted the saying of heaven and law. Even planting a crop of spiritual rice cannot skip the stages of sprouting, growth, maturity, and ear formation. With the dim oil lamp, Chen Mo calmed down and immersed himself in the mental method of Huaishan Yangqi Gong, feeling the difference of absorbing spiritual energy and nourishing the body with this method. Finally, after a whole night of trying, the original Yangqi Ju in the body gradually changed its circulation and began to adapt. For the next week, Chen Mo continued to experience the pain after changing the method. The experience did not move at all, and even dropped to 0. If he had not broken through the 4th level of qi refining, the 300 experience points of the 3rd level might have been cleared. Not only that, his body also had some discomfort, hot and cold, extremely weak. Song Yunshi also told him at the beginning that unless it was necessary, he should not change the practice method easily, otherwise his realm would regress at the least, and his internal organs would be damaged at the worst. Finally, on the 8th day, a trace of new spiritual energy was generated in Chen Mo's body. Then, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth began to gather, and began to flow in the body along the meridians, and finally gathered in the Dantian. However, it is different from Yangqi Ju. When the spiritual energy gathers in the Dantian, part of it is fed back to the body to further nourish the flesh. At this moment, Chen Mo finally understood why this technique has the function of prolonging life. However, the improvement of realm is delayed. Chen Mo roughly estimated that it only takes 2 years to gain 300 experience points. If it is changed to Huaishan Yangqi Gong, it may take 3 years. This is just a breakthrough from the 3rd level of qi refining to the 4th level of qi refining. Now, if Chen Mo wants to break through the 5th level of qi refining, it may take 5 years. Chapter 89, Herbal Farmers and Longevity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Mo breathed a sigh of relief. Slow is slow, but there are also benefits to slowness. As a spiritual plant husband, he has poor talent and his resources are not comparable to those of the disciples of Qingyang sect. In this case, the longer you live, the more opportunities you will have. He stood up and stretched his muscles, walked from the study to the living room, and then opened the door from the living room. For several days, just to change the practice, Chen Mo felt like he didn't know what year it was. Outside the door, it was already snowy. It was another winter, and the entire Xian Peak was dead silent. Small wooden houses stood in the fields, and the spiritual plant husbands were all practicing hard in this winter, hoping to gain some enlightenment and breakthrough. A figure flashed out. Xiao Kong opened his wings to hug him, but was easily dodged by Chen Mo. Cluck! Cluck! That it was a little dissatisfied. How is the egg hatching? Chen Mo asked with a smile. However, it would have been better if he hadn't asked. Once he asked. Xiao Kong was furious. He jumped lightly and jumped into the chicken coop again, and came to a squatting big rooster, flapping its wings on the other chicken's head. The beaten chicken dared not to be angry, but could only look at Chen Mo with grievance. The eggs didn't hatch, and it couldn't do anything about it. Okay, beat it into a paste again. Chen Mo stopped him. However, Xiao Kong was used to being domineering in the chicken world and ignored him. After chatting for a few words, Chen Mo returned to the house. Now, the method has been forcibly changed from Yangqi Ju to Huaishan Yangqi Gong. I don't know if it's because of the method, but he feels much calmer. After practicing the method, Chen Mo first cooked a bowl of spiritual rice and brewed a cup of Xianrenfeng for himself. After eating and drinking, he took out the 2 spells that he also bought at a high price from the storage ring. Cicada hiding technique, a method of concealing one's breath. When practiced to the extreme, one can completely hide one's breath and make the enemy unable to detect it. Of course, the higher the opponent's cultivation level, the weaker the effect of this spell. In addition, it also has the function of hiding one's cultivation level. The 4th level of qi refining disguises as the 3rd or 2nd level of qi refining. In short, it is convenient for sneak attacks. However, cultivators who practice this spell rarely use it to hide their cultivation level. After all, strength represents status, always showing others as the initial stage of qi refining. The status is not that high. The reason why it is worth a low-grade spirit stone is that it is used for concealing breath and assassination. Another spell, poison detoxification. After Chen Mo read it through, he remembered the 7 poisonous flowers and poisonous grasses recorded in the spell. Using this as medicine, preparing the corpse-dissolving poison, and combining it with the method of poison detoxification, it can easily eliminate people and leave only a pool of blood. It is many times better than destroying the corpse with his flame palm. In theory, the effect of this spell is not weaker than cicada hidden art, but because of the 7 poisonous grasses, it is difficult for practitioners to prepare the corresponding poison. Burning leaf grass, black blood flower. Chen Mo has seen these poisonous flowers and grasses in the spiritual plant atlas. Their functions are far more than just refining poisons. Take the burning leaf grass for example. It can not only refine poisons, but also is an important auxiliary medicine for refining fire power pills. After grinding into juice, it can also be used to blend and draw talismans. Other herbs also have different effects. Chen Mo once inquired that there are spiritual plant husbands who specialize in growing herbs in Xian Peak. This is another variant besides breeders, herbal farmers, compared with rice, which is done in one go. Except for weeding and watering every day, there is almost nothing to do. Herbal farmers need to pay attention to the growth of herbs at all times. If they are not careful, all their efforts will be wasted. Chen Mo didn't know whether his talents of increase yield, harvest, and gather spirits would work, but since he was a spiritual plant husband, he would have to plant herbs sooner or later. After making up his mind, he would go to the market to buy a batch of spiritual medicine seeds and plants next spring, and try to start planting things other than spiritual yellow rice. It took another 3 days to practice the cicada hiding technique and poison detoxification technique, but he had not yet entered the door. The former could barely reduce part of his own breath, and the latter was only familiar with the route of practice, and there was still a big gap from being truly applied in actual combat. However, the so-called magic was just a slow work for Chen Mo, and as long as there was time, there would always be some improvement. The snow outside the house stopped. Chen Mo opened the window and took a breath. Shao Kong was still lying on the window with high spirits, looking in eagerly. The hen had not grown up, and the eggs of the five-horned heavy lizard had not hatched. It really didn't know what to do every day. Can't you stand the loneliness? Like many spiritual plant husbands, Shao Kong was trapped in a palm-sized place every day, and his walking range was only 100 miles in his lifetime. Although he was a cultivator, he was just living. Cluck, cluck. Chen Mo smiled and jumped out of the window. He sat cross-legged on the white snow and combed the feathers of the chickens one by one. The chickens that had been doing nothing were now lined up neatly. After combing one, they would consciously run to the end of the line and wait for the next time. Luckily Chen Mo counted. The evil plan of the chickens did not succeed. The life of a spiritual plant husband is so boring. After combing this batch, Chen Mo could only go back to the house to continue practicing. Shao Kong paced back and forth in the chicken shed board, occasionally raising his head and occasionally lowering his head, as if thinking about life. A month passed in a flash. In a month, Huaishan Yangqi Gong only gained 7 experience points. At this rate, it will take more than 5 years to break through the 5th level of qi refining. The progress is not a little slow, but the good thing is that the effect of this technique is still showing. Name, Chen Mo. Occupation, Spirit Planter, unlocked. Spiritual Cultivator, unlocked. Spirit Fisherman, unlocked. Lifespan, 34 out of 86. Cultivation, 4th level of qi refining. Skill, Huaishan Yangqi Gong, 7 out of 400. Spiritual Root. Golden Spiritual Root, 1st level 73/100. Spell. Raining Technique, Minor Success 492/800. Air Transfer Technique, Minor Success 33/800. Active Technique, Mastery 366/400. Flame Palm, Great Success 1/1600. Genjin Finger, Great 1/1600. Spirit Snake Body Skill, Great 1/1600. Cicada Hiding Technique, not yet started 22/50ths. Poison Detoxification Technique, not yet started 13/50ths. Talents. Spirit Plant Husband, Increase Production, Purple, Breeding, Purple, Ripening, Green, Gathering Spirits, Green. Spiritual Cultivation Officer, Strong, Blue. When he broke through the 4th level of qi refining years ago, Chen Mo's lifespan jumped from 80 to 85 years old, and after only 1 month of practice, this skill brought him another 1 year of life. At this rate, Chen Mo's lifespan can increase by 12 years every year. This does not count the life leap at each breakthrough. Of course, Chen Mo also knows that lifespan cannot be infinitely increased, but it can always live a few more years, right? Chapter 90, White Snake Market Master Song. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the foot of Xian Peak, there is a piece of white snow. The mountain is lush and green. The mountains and rocks stand in a forest. The flowers and plants are fragrant. The animals and insects are chirping. A scene full of vitality. Thousands of disciples under the sect. Some meditate, some practice, some read history, some grow flowers. A peaceful and good time, unlike the struggle at the foot of the mountain. All the disciples who worship into the immortal sect, even the lowest outer disciples, are treated much better. Not to mention the spiritual sand and spiritual stones for cultivation every month. At the beginning of cultivation, they can get a pill for cleansing tendons and cutting marrow, and in half a year, they can also get a qi refining pill for improving cultivation. These disciples have no worries about food and clothing. The only worry is the annual competition of each peak and the Qingyang sect competition every 5 years. Their cultivation itself is the purpose. But where do they get food, clothing and other expenses? Isn't it the group of spiritual plant husbands at the foot of the mountain who work hard all day but can barely make ends meet? There are 10 halls on Xian Peak, and the highest status belongs to the transmission hall. The elder of the transmission hall is called Zhu Qi, who is only 55 years old and has reached the 6th level of foundation building. Of course, with his realm, he naturally cannot do without a Taoist partner, and most of his descendants are disciples of Xian Peak. At this moment, Song Yunshi knelt on the cushion with his head down, not daring to look at his uncle Zhu Qi's eyes, but his hands, which were not placed somewhere, were always rubbing. Yunshi. Aunt, disciple is here. Zhu Qi walked back and forth in the transmission hall with his hands behind his back. You are active by nature, and you can't stay in Xian Peak for a few days a year. I am still very pleased that you are willing to retreat for 2 years this time. Song Yunshi was happy in his heart. It seems that this day is finally coming. Master taught me well. Forget it, being a shop owner in Xian Peak is not bad. Zhu Qi walked to Song Yunshi and continued, I said at the beginning that the position of shop owner in Baishi market can only wait for you for 2 years. If you can't meet the minimum requirement of shop owner after 2 years, the 8th level of qi refining, then Baishi market will have nothing to do with you. From now on, you should stay in Xian Peak to practice honestly. It's better not to do that ridiculous business. Song Yunshi didn't dare to interrupt. At this time, whatever his uncle said was what it was. As long as he could become the shop owner, it didn't matter if he knelt for 3 days and 3 nights. I didn't expect it. 2 years really made you succeed. Zhu Qi smiled and stroked it back. Although your mother has no spiritual roots, you are still a seedling of cultivation. What a pity. What a pity. If you can calm down, although you can't compare with Mo Junqing, I'm afraid you are not much worse than Li Shangxian. Song Yunshi's ears are about to be calloused after hearing this sentence. Practice hard. Only a fool would be willing to practice hard. Eating, drinking, and having fun every day, strolling around the Wenxiang pavilion, and sleeping with female Taoist friends, isn't it nice? Anyway, you can't become a golden elixir, and you can't live a few more years, so why not enjoy yourself in time? Earn more spiritual stones, drink more pots of spiritual wine, how happy. After you go down, remember to be diligent. Collect more resources for Xian Peak, and the annual grain tax cannot be less than a penny. Remember. The white snake market is not small enough for you to toss. Disciple remember. Song Yunshi clasped his fists, still without raising his head. Go. Song Yunshi slowly stood up and stepped out of the transmission hall. However, as soon as he went out, he instantly sacrificed his long sword, tiptoed, and went down the mountain at the fastest speed. Outside the hall, Zhu Qi looked at his nephew who seemed to be running for his life. Even though he had practiced for many years and had a calm heart, he still couldn't help but pull the corners of his mouth. The winter wind is very cold, and it is even more piercing when flying with a sword. However, no matter how cold the weather was, it couldn't resist Song Yunshi's fiery heart. Fengshe, here I come. Wenxiang Pavilion. Here I come. That when he thought that he had finally become the owner of the white snake Fengshe, he almost couldn't close his mouth. Originally, the owner of a Fengshe would not be easily replaced unless he died of old age. There were a total of 34 Fengshe at the foot of Xian Peak, and the longest-serving Fengshe had worked for a full 60 years. 60 years. How many disciples of Xian Peak died? But he stood firm. Song Yunshi originally thought that he would never have the opportunity to become the owner of a Fengshe in his life. After all, even if someone stepped down, it would not be his turn. There were still many direct descendants of the peak owner waiting in line, but unexpectedly, the secret realm 2 years ago made a great contribution. The evil spirit that came out of nowhere killed 9 Fengshe who were watching the fun, and now a lot of positions were vacant. At first, Song Yunshi was only at the 7th level of qi refining, and he did not meet the requirements of being the master of the shop, but his uncle also took great efforts and lost face to buy him 2 years. In the past 2 years, Song Yunshi seemed to have changed his nature. He did nothing and practiced hard every day. Finally, before the agreed time, he successfully broke through to the 8th level of qi refining, and he, naturally, became the master of the White Snake Shop. Now the White Snake Shop has set up a banquet, just waiting for him to take office. However, Song Yunshi's first stop was not there, but the ancient dust shop. The flying sword fell, and Song Yunshi stopped in front of the Wenxiang Pavilion. Hong Yan, who was sitting at the door, heard the movement and hurried out to greet him, but as soon as she saw who was coming, the other party stepped on the flying sword again and left. Song Yunshi. He's back. Why did he leave again? Hongyan was puzzled. She hadn't seen this person for 2 years. She didn't expect that he didn't come in after coming. Didn't Song Yinshi want to come in? When he was cultivating, he often missed the female cultivators in Wenxiang Pavilion. This time he came down the mountain, he naturally wanted to release some energy. However, happiness should be shared, he still had to share this good news with his brothers. The flying sword fell again, and Song Yinshi pushed open the door of the 123 grain station. The sleepy Mei Hua burst into tears of joy the moment she saw him. Boss! Boss, you are finally back. Ha! I am back, but I have to leave in 2 days. Leave? Where are you going? That the mood that was just like a sunflower suddenly sank to the bottom again. Don't worry, I will take you wherever I go this time. I guarantee that you will have a good life in the future. I will also let you know how wise it was to follow me in the first place. Song Yinshi was in such a good mood that he began to speak with some sloppy words. Really? Of course. By the way, where is my brother Chen now? I'll go find him. He should still be in the fields. In the past 2 years, whenever fellow Taoist Chen comes to the market, he will come to ask about you. Song Yinshi smiled and nodded, okay. Let's go, you lead the way, we'll go pick up brother Chen. Yes, that Mei Hua trembled and stood on the flying sword, and the two of them soared into the air, cutting through the sky. Are you sure you saw Song Yinshi? Master, the man who just flew the sword was him. Cui Ji said respectfully. Niu Yuliang stood up, let's go. Follow me to see him. But what? He just appeared not long ago and left with his shop boy.